Hey there! Recently I made a watercolor painting showing a night sky scene with trees and stars, and while doing that I realized I could turn this into a bookmark. So here I am showing 3 bookmark design ideas and how to create them. So let's get started! To begin, I start with a wood board, 300 GSM watercolor paper and masking tape. Just as a note here, if you want to work with wet mediums such as watercolor, choose thick paper. Using masking tape and the wood board, I tape down the edges to keep the paper more flat. In addition, I use the masking tape to divide the area I want to paint into 3 sections. Even without measuring, I made sure to divide the sections as evenly as I could. And I also tried to get kind of 90-degree angles in the corners. Next I grab some black ink, a paintbrush and start painting the designs. My first design is a landscape filled with mountains and some flying birds. To create mountains, I paint kind of triangles in different sizes, shapes and without using straight lines. The mountains I distribute also not evenly to make it more natural. After I drew the outlines, I filled in the shapes with ink. For the birds, I use kind of 2 bows which meet in the middle and enhance the middle section a little bit more. Now I'm moving on to the second scene, which shows 3 palm trees, 1 in the foreground and 2 in the back. To paint them, I start with 1 thick stroke from the bottom to the middle of the crown, which represents the stem. Then I move on by adding similar strokes going out from the middle of the crown, but I make them shorter and if possible slimmer than the stroke for the stem. Those will be the palm fronts and the strokes build the middle for each front. To finish the fronts, I will be adding lines to the left and the right sides and connecting them with the middle part. But for now, I decided to add more details, at least to the palm in the foreground. Therefore, I placed some black dots in the middle of the crown to represent coconuts and even added some more detail to the stem later. By the way, I tried to keep the arrangement and the scene of the palms more realistic by blending in and incorporating influences from nature and the environment. For example, gravity drags the leaves and in some cases also the stem towards the ground. The leaves are also not spread completely evenly and don't go out completely straight from the middle. In addition, a scene can also change depending on where you look from. In my case, the view is from the bottom to the top and from the side, so some leaves are seen completely and some are more hidden. After I have finished painting the first palm, I move on painting the other palms using the same process again. Now I move on painting the last area. Basically, this is the design which is based on the original painting I did and which brought me to this idea. This design consists of evergreen trees out of a perspective you'd see standing before a forest. To paint the evergreen trees, start with a stroke getting thicker towards the bottom. Again, try to incorporate the perspective and any natural influences. Next, I placed curved lines to each side of the thick stroke, which is my stem, and the curved lines represent branches. For the final touch, I also add more fine strokes across the stem and the branches, as well as some more branches in between. Now there's some ink left. I dilute this ink with some water to get a lighter shade and add some more elements to the mountain scene and the evergreen trees. After all the scenes are painted, I dry them very well with my heating tool, because I'm going to apply watercolor on top of it. So for the painting in the middle, I decided to create a gradient, going from yellow to magenta. Here I use watercolor inks in different colors from Avec. And just as a note, the colors are also from different sets. Next, I move on to the left scene. Here I decided to create a gradient with yellow, red and blue. And finally, it's time to paint the last scene, and therefore I use green, blue, blue and purple. After that was done, I tried everything again. At this point, I wasn't completely happy with the results for some reasons. I had the feeling that there was something missing. The sky felt boring and somehow the paper didn't handle the water well, at least at some areas. So I decided to add clouds and stars with metallic watercolor paint and used this paint also to cover some of my spills. First, I tried to use white watercolor, but because I didn't prepare the areas and white watercolor isn't supposed to cover, it didn't work that well. Because of that, I decided to use metallic paints and I really liked the results. Again, I dried everything and after it was dry, I removed the masking tape. While doing that, the tape ripped a piece of my paper. So I carefully removed the ripped paper from the masking tape, grabbed some liquid all-purpose glue, applied it and carefully placed and adhered it back on. If the quality and long-term lasting is very important to you, make sure to use light-fast paint and acid-free materials. Plus, maybe remove it more carefully as I did. Because the paint bled underneath my masking tape, I used a white acrylic paint marker to clean up the edges. But in my case, it wasn't necessary because I later decided to leave no frame and cut along the edges of my paintings. As said before, here I'm cutting all the bookmarks down to their final size. protect the bookmarks when used, I put them into a laminating pouch and laminated them. In my case, I run it through twice because I wanted to have a nice seal. After laminating, I cut away the excess. And later, I also rounded the corners. For a final touch, I wanted to add a tassel. Therefore, I wrapped some cotton yarn in different colors around my fingers. And after that, removed the bundle carefully. All ends should be placed on one side. On the opposite side, I put a string through the loops and tied it together. Then I grabbed another piece of yarn, put it under the loops where I wanted to place the string through, and wrapped it around. After that, I also tied this piece of yarn together. By the way, if you are wondering, this was the first one I did, and the steps are not in the order I would recommend. So even if the steps themselves are right, and it worked for me in this order as well, it could be easier changing it up. Lastly, I punched a hole into all of the bookmarks and inserted the tassel into the first one. I repeated the process for the other ones as well with different colors. And now they are done! If you enjoyed this video, I would be very happy if you like this video, subscribe for more content like this, and see you next time. Bye!